Okay, let's talk about data entry, importing, and exporting. So we'll talk about manual data entry first, then importing, and then briefly exporting. Okay, so a few notes about manual entry. You can use a text editor. So R has a built-in text editor that'll help you edit data sets. Or you can actually create a text file directly in the console and then save it as a data frame. And of course, you can manually type in the variables one at a time also, as we've learned previously. So here's the pseudocode. First, you'll type use data.frame, and this will create an empty data set called my.data. And then if you run edit my.data for your empty data frame, it will allow you to enter the data in a text editor. The other thing you can actually do, I see this done less often, is you can actually type, save a text file in the workspace using quotes. So when it's inside quotes, it's a text file, and then you can change that text file, save it as a data frame using the read.table function. So let's look at an example. So first thing I might want to do is I'm going to create my data frame. So you'll know now class data doesn't have anything in it. It's just an empty data frame. But if I type edit class data, it brings up this text editor. And so here, if I click on variable 1, I can save as a character variable or a numeric, and I can change the title. So suppose our class data set, here's the data set that I'm going to look at more carefully. So suppose my first variable is gender. I would type gender, and it's character. So I just close that out. Now I have a gender, and I can type male, go down, female, much like you would in Excel, etc. And make sure you use, recall R is case sensitive. Okay, and I could go to variable 2. Maybe this is numeric. Maybe we want to put high school class next. Enter or close it, and then I could type 450, etc., etc., etc. And then once you close it, now you have a class data set. And it didn't know what to do for the last two rows here because I had entry for gender but not for high school class, so it put NA for not available. Okay. So that's how you would use a text editor with a built-in R editor. The other thing you can do is you can actually say, I'm going to create a text file directly in the console. So I have class.data.text. That's the name of my object. And I have a quote to start. And I'm just going to type gender, text sent. Suppose those are the variables I'm interested in. And I have male, tab 10, carriage return. Or I can actually use a space. Either way will work as long as I'm consistent. Male space 25, female 45, female 70, and do make sure that you enter the last carriage return so it knows that it's done reading the data for that row. If you hadn't had an enter before this last quote, you might run into problems. And you'll notice if I type class.data.text, it gives you this weird stuff. So \n, \n is for carriage return, and then it has space and etc. So that's how R treats a text file. We don't need to be too concerned with that. But I have this text file. I can turn it into a data frame using read.table now. And I just have to say text is class.data.text. That's the name of this object. And I want to say header equals true. Typically you want header equals true if you have a header. So you notice the first row was actually the variable names and not actual values of variables, so hence I would have header equal true. And now I have this data set. Okay. Now very rarely would we want to input large data sets in practice, so we want to be able to be familiar with reading with the function read table, and so this falls under the category importing data. So a few notes. First, make sure that the text file is in your working directory. Alternatively, you can manually type in the full address where the file is, and R will find it. One of the important options is this sep equals quote quote in read.table in the read.table function. This is the default and the most flexible. It means look for a space or a tab or new lines for a new variable or for a new entry. You can also use more specific. You can tell R, I only want to be done reading an entry after commas. So data are separated by commas or \t for tabs, and you can read the help file to find more. We won't get into too much depth about this, but if you're a scripter, you're going to want to get good at using this function. That means if you're using R as sort of a high-end level, combining, merging files, and that's your primary purpose, so you'll want to be good at read.table. So here's the pseudocode. So you can do it this way, data.frame, and then you just have to list where, here's the name of the file, myfile.txt, and you would have to list the full address. And if there's a header, if the first row is actually variable names, put header equals true. Alternatively, a method that I prefer is I set my working directory to wherever my data is, and then that way I can just type myfile.txt or the name of my file without having to worry about getting all of the long address typed in correctly. So let's do an example. So again, the first thing is to read the help file. If you read table, at least read file. This is the name of the file where data are to be read from. Each row of the table appears as one line of the file. Okay, so that is very difficult to change that. So each row is one line of the file. And you can read more and so on, and read more details about this to learn more. The other main option we're gonna want to be familiar with is header. As I've said, this is a logical value indicating whether the file contains the names of the variables as its first line. Okay, so I'm going to see where my working directory is. I already have my working directory set to this directory. If it's not, you'll want to set it to wherever your data set is. So you'll notice here's where my data set is saved, H, Windows, SAS, and R/day4, and you'll notice here are my files. Do be careful. One thing I like to do is to right-click on the address and copy, but you'll notice I want forward slashes, not backslashes, when I'm telling R an address. Okay, so anyway, I'll set my working directory. This is redundant, but if your working directory is not that already, you would need to set it. And now my working directory is for sure set. And I'm going to go class.data, that's going to be my data frame, and the function is read.table, and here is the name of my data set. And how do I know header equals true? If I actually open this file, I have a preview there, but you'll notice you just have to open and look at the file, and here I have the first row is clearly variable names. So, and one thing you'll notice in this line of code, I did not put header equals true, so what happened? Here it has variable 1, and then it thinks the value of variable 1 is gender, and then M, F, M, and so on. The value of variable 2 is class, stat 2023, and so on. And so that confused R. And if you look at the class data, if you look at the structure of the class data, you notice now it says variable 1 is a factor with values F, gender, and M. That's not really at all what we want, correct? And the whole problem there is that we left off header equals true. Okay, So again, always look at the file and see if you want header equals true. So if I put the header equals true option in there, and again, either way I run this code, here I already have my working directory set, so it will look for the student data in the current directory, but if you want, you can type in the full address. But either way, the important point is that I have header equals true, so now if I look at class.data, that's the way I want it saved. Gender is actually the name of my variable, class is the name of my variable, high school class is the name of my variable, and so on. Okay. And if I run structure of it, now it's what I want. The first variable is gender. It's a factor with 2 levels, female and male, and so on. Integer, factor. Another nice trick is actually read.table will work on a lot of different types of files. So in fact, I can even copy and paste, so to speak, data into R using read.table and then quote clipboard. So let me show you that. Let's open my student data, copy. Now my data is on my clipboard. And indeed that worked. There it is. I can even use read.table to go directly from a URL. So if you go to this website, you'll notice here's a website with data set saved like this. So a lot of more advanced textbooks have their data sets already on a website somewhere like this, and you import data exactly like this. But anyway, here is a text file at this website. If I go read.table and enter the address of that website and header equals true, again, I've imported my class data. Okay, so read.table is really a very powerful tool. We can talk about importing data using read.csv, which is designed specifically for Excel files. So some notes. First, save your Excel file as a .csv. So Excel, depending on the version, has lots of different extensions. Then you want to use read.csv. You can still actually use read.table on an Excel file. So read.table is going to be your go-to import function. But if you want to specifically use, import CSV or Excel data, this is the pseudocode, my data frame file equals my file.csv. And again, you'll want to look and see if you need header equals true option. So let's look at this example. First thing we want to do is read the help file, and actually it has the same help file for all of these. I did help of read.csv. These are all the same help file. So here it goes header equals true, and really the main difference is that it has a couple of defaults that are different. So you'll notice sep equals comma, so that's comma delimited is what it's looking for. Okay. So if I open my Excel file and the preview, it's obvious that it's comma delimited, but you might want to check and go save as. And here you have all of these options, and this is why it's a little trickier working with Excel. But here I have CSV comma delimited, save, go ahead and replace it. So here's my Excel data. And let's run the code. And here I have my comma delimited. Now, I want to show you what happens if I change. What if I just format this a little bit? So I'm going to add a border, say over here, right border. Okay? If I run the same code, Oh, need to save it. Okay, so I just formatted my data a little bit different in Excel. If I rerun the code, you'll notice R got all confused. And so this is the challenge of directly importing with Excel. So that extra formatting that I put in the last column let Excel, or let R, think that there's a whole nother variable there, but there was really just blank spaces. Okay. So notice the right border on the file confused read.csv. What about read.table? So what if I try to import the same file, header equals true? Yikes. What's the issue here? The default separation for separating values of variables in read.table is space or tab, not comma, and that is a comma delimited file. So one thing I can do is, here I ran this code, sep, and I sep equals comma, so then it knew how to go read the file, and that would have worked, except for it still gets confused by that formatted column, formatted extra column. So it still enters a bunch of blanks there. So really, if you have some formatting issues with Excel, that's going to be tricky. Your best bet is to try to fix those with Excel, or you can, there are options available in read.table. Another option that I actually use, which is not too smooth, but is really the quickest way of doing things, is I just copy and paste. So now I have class data. I just copied the data that I wanted to import. I didn't have to worry about trying to tell R to skip the first 3 lines, skip the last column, etc. So that's really a fairly reasonable way to do things, especially if you don't have a real large file. All right. Lastly, let's talk about writing files. I'll note that you probably want quote equals false in the options, especially if you're writing an Excel file. Make sure the file isn't already open, or we'll get confused if a file is open and then you try to write to an open existing file. Default, if the file is not open, is to create a new file and write over the top of it. So here's the pseudocode. You'll want to go write.csv, and this is your actual data in your R workspace, and here's the name of your Excel file, or write.table. Here is the data in your R workspace, and here is the name of your text file. So for example, if I wanted to export a data set that exists into R, this could be useful. So first thing again is always to read the help file, write.table and write.csv. Read those carefully on your own time. So let's look at the USA arrest data. This is a popular data set in R, and I might want to write this as an Excel file so you can read more about it, but it has murder, assault, urban population, and rape statistics for the 50 US states. So let's run write.csv. Well, let's type in USA arrest to see what it looks like. So here I have a 50 rows, 4 variables. That's my data frame. And if I write .csv x equals USA arrest, so that's my R object. And here's what I want to name it, arrest data.csv, and I want to do quote equals false. And what did that do? Arrest data, it wrote this data. So it wrote it as a tab delimited file. So let's delete that, and I'll show you that it actually does just get written. So So if you keep your eye on the screen here, write.csv, you see it pop up, the rest data. Okay. I could also save it as a text file using write.table. Okay, here I'm going to make sure that I save my image because I'm going to want to use this data, class data, and the class data.text for later lectures.